Well, we're going to need to be strong this evening. Good evening. Welcome to Yada Yahowah. We're here with Kirk this evening, and as I shared with you, my ongoing battles with COVID Part 2 is ongoing. It turned into an intestinal thing. Still a little bit in the sinuses and throat. Still a bit of a hack, but it just doesn't really want to give up. This is really a nasty bugger. It's a shame that it was created in this manner and thrust upon the world, but we are so far away from this one being over. The variants continue to mutate, and this one is interesting in that if you get it, there's 3 different variants going around right now. It won't even protect you for a week, the antibodies, from the next variant.
Really?
So, it used to be if you get something, you're done. If you take the vaccine, you were good for anywhere from the worst case. A vaccine was 12 months. Best case, it would last for years. Well, gosh, the vaccine got down to about 10 weeks, and even getting the daggone virus, your antibodies now are capable of lasting a day or two. So it is an ongoing frustration. I have been very critical of police for, I guess, better part of 20 years that I've been doing this. My issue with police is that they have gotten far too militaristic, far too bossy, willing to deprive people of their freedoms, way too arrogant, way too dishonest. There's way too many police that will frame an individual and stick together and lie and perjure themselves in court. It's a sad thing, and I think one of the problems was we recruited way too many policemen from the military with that shoot to kill mentality, and in the military you're trained to lie. Every study that's been done of the U.S. military shows that they will revert to a lie even if the truth serves their interests. But occasionally you have to say credit where credit is due. There was a crime that took place at a drive-through McDonald's. It's in Utah, and it looks like a Muslim man. His name was Sadat Johnson. So old Sadat, he's got his Islamic beard. He's driving through the McDonald's, and he evidently doesn't speak very clearly, and the order gets a bit messed up, and so he thought that the best approach to that was to pull a gun on the girl that was handing out the meals. So she did not think that was a really good idea, and so she notified the police, who came, and while he was still being belligerent, asked him to get out of the car. But he's too special to do that, so he resisted arrest, and because he had wielded a gun, they knew he was armed. He gave the gun to his 4-year-old kid that was sitting in the back seat. They told his 4-year-old kid to shoot and kill the cop.
Wow.
And the kid started shooting at the cop. And to their credit, the cop said, "That's a kid in the back seat. Don't fire back." And they arrested the father. They talked the kid out of it, took the gun. And there's an example of somebody thought it through, had some character, had some courage, did the right thing, and spared the kid's life. There was a conviction with a Missouri jury of Stephen Cannon. He is a charming representative of the African American community that thought that he would be part of Black Lives Matter rallies. And while he was there and looting, because well, that's the way that we demonstrate that we're really mad that we're killing ourselves and that we're pointing the finger at you. So the way that we show that we're morally justified and superior is we go loot.
Steal stuff.
And while he was looting, there was an off-duty cop that was responding to a buddy of his burglar alarm that went off. And so this fine, upstanding protester and political activist decided that he would shoot and kill the police officer. And he was convicted, thankfully. But I bet you didn't know that.
No.
No, we've got January 6th hearings up the wazoo. Nobody was deliberately shot and killed. Well, there was one woman that was shot and killed, but she was shot and killed by the police.
That was by the police, yes.
Yeah, she was shot and killed by the police. I think there were 2 or 3 cops that died, but none of them died as a result of somebody trying to kill them, shooting them. The only person that was shot to death was a innocent person who was shot and killed by the police. And yet we hear of it, and we do not hear of the Black Lives Matter looter. By the way, the only things that were looted from the Capitol, I think, were a rostrum, which was ultimately left there, and a nameplate from Pelosi's office. Not that she needed, her nameplate, but that was about it. But what I would like to say is that have you witnessed any of the commotions and riots that are going on in Sri Lanka?
No, not at all.
Okay, all right. Well, if the if the January 6th Commission would like to know the definition of an insurrection, they really ought to look at film at Sri Lanka. That was an insurrection. That is the citizenry en masse deliberately going in to overthrow and oust their prime minister, whom, of course, they had voted for. Therefore, they have no one to blame but themselves. And then make certain that he has to flee for his life and then take over his residence. And then march on the Capitol over and over again and demand new leadership. That is an insurrection. Now, what happened on January 6th was a political rally gone bad, where 95% of the people who did march on the Capitol, and they should have done that, but nonetheless, 95% of the people that were there, if you look at the video, are overweight, conservative, conspiratorial, they love Trump, flag-waving Americans who were there to take selfies, and that's what they were doing. That was no more an insurrection than I am a rocket scientist. Now, we just need to, as a nation, get a grip on what is reasonable, or no one's going to believe anybody. And the only currency government has is credibility. The only currency the economy has is credibility. And when you lose it to these kinds of things, then you have absolutely nothing left. Now, speaking of losing all credibility, the President of the United States, and it's finally come to the point where now major news agencies are using the term that I've been using now for the past 2 years, really since well before the election, that electing Biden will be like Weekend at Bernie's. The man has lost it. He is senile. He has dementia.
Yes.
The best they can do is point him to sit there and wave your arm now and then sit down. He cannot complete a sentence. It is absolutely pathetic that this nation would prop up a man in that condition and pretend that he is actually the President of the United States. And to think that we cannot oust him because Kamala Harris has got to be the dumbest human being to breathe air on this planet. And she doesn't have dementia, and yet she can't help but speak in word salads. it is just pathetic what we have done to ourselves. And if you think that our last election was between Donald Trump and Joe Biden with Kamala Harris as his running mate, you ought to just sit down and cry. It is, shame on us. Anyway, the Bidenmeister was did two things on his trip. A weekend at Bernie's, went to Israel. And at Israel, after being pointed and said, stand there, do this, do that, he proclaimed that the Palestinians deserve a state of their own, which is contiguous and enduring. Well, a contiguous state of their own would therefore include Gaza. If there was an election, an open election anywhere in among the Palestinians, the so-called Palestinians, there is no such thing, but the mystical people masquerading around as Palestinians, I call them Fakistinians, they would vote for Hamas.
Yes.
And so what you're saying is Hamas deserves a state of its own. We gave Hamas a state of its own because the United States forced Israel out of Gaza, and what did that achieve? It created a living hell for the Fakistinians living in Gaza, and a hellish condition for Israel. And now what we want to do is double down on that stupidity. But that's the two-state solution, which I like to call the final solution, because it is the intent to destroy Israel. But that's where we are nonetheless. The next thing that Bernie did is he went to Saudi Arabia. He began his Saudi Arabia trip by taking credit for opening Saudi airspace to Israeli aircraft. The second thing he did is take credit for a joint defense alliance against Iran. And the third thing he took credit for was moving Saudi Arabia closer towards recognition of Israel and the Abraham Accords. So he hadn't been in the air for 15 minutes out of Saudi Arabia before the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia said in a news conference, I would like to clear up some things. One, we did not open our airspace to Israel. We simply opened our airspace, and it had nothing to do with the president's trip. Second, we did not ever discuss, there wasn't a single discussion on this notion of a defense alliance against Iran. And third, we did not discuss, and we are not planning to normalize relationships with Israel. So I don't know what happened, but I can tell you those things did not happen. Can you imagine being that out of it?
Wow.
But that is our current state of governance in the United States. A couple of weeks ago, Abe, who was the longest-serving prime minister of Japan, was shot and killed because the young man said that his mother had been duped by the Moonies to give her entire life savings. She went bankrupt because the church took it all. And he blamed Abe and his family for bringing the Moonies into Japan. It's a Korean Messianic organization. Turns out he was right. I mean, he wasn't right to kill Abe, but his family, his father, brought the Moonies into Japan, established their headquarters right next to his apartment, encouraged them, and his son has done everything he can to encourage them and to speak of how wonderful an organization they are. This is a nutcase that claims to be the Messiah and that he has his own special interpretation of the Bible. He is, in fact, I think that the founding father of the Moonies ended up spending the latter years of his life as a guest of the United States on the federal pen for money laundering, racketeering, bribery, those kinds of things. He is clearly a stalwart. One last item in the news. There's been a big uproar over a 10-year-old girl who was an alleged rape victim who was forced to flee Ohio and go to Indiana to get an abortion. And so the president, Weekend at Bernie's, comes out and says, well, I don't think it's fair to live in a country where a 10-year-old rape victim has to cross state lines just to get an abortion. Let's just pretend that there really was a 10-year-old that was raped and that she got pregnant. It's probably possible that there is a scumbag out there, disgusting and immoral enough to rape a woman. Well, certainly there's scumbags out there to rape women, but to rape a 10-year-old girl, that really goes to the bottom edge of scumminess. That being the case, let's just say that happened, that there is somebody that's scummy. Why aren't we denouncing the pedophile? Why are we denouncing the government for saying that she can't have an abortion here? And oh, by the way, they were wrong. She was I don't know what number of weeks she was pregnant, like 6 weeks, something like that. She was well within the time frame to get an abortion in Ohio, regardless of her age. So she absolutely could have gotten an abortion in Ohio. And certainly, if she was pregnant, it's hard to believe a 10-year-old can get pregnant, but nonetheless, they said that's what happened. Then she was eligible for it. The president lied and didn't bother to condemn the one thing that actually mattered, which was not including her from getting an abortion in her home state, which she could have gotten, but that I think a 27-year-old man would rape a 10-year-old girl. We really do have our priorities and everything just upside down, do we not?
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you one quick question about the Saudi Arabia trip. Mm-hmm. It's okay for him to go and beg for them to produce more oil because that doesn't seem to have an effect on the environment and all the things that they hold sacred. Yet the Americans can't do that. Why can't? And then at the same time say Americans can't pump any oil.
Yeah, so
that would help us.
He won't lease federal lands because we have plenty of oil. The United States has no shortage of oil. Anwar alone would eliminate our concerns. But no, he doesn't want to do that because he's a progressive, and the progressives don't like that kind of thing. Matter of fact, it's since you mentioned his issues, which are he's in conflict. Well, his handlers are in conflict. I don't think. I don't think he knows what his issues are. Anything except which thumb he's going to suck to pacify himself. But his handlers are in conflict because they are desperate for environmental legislation that will, of course, exacerbate the problem they exacerbated when they came into office, shut down all pipeline development, shut down all oil leases, and then started bad-mouthing the oil companies and denouncing them, and then imposing new environmental laws that made it more difficult. And so they essentially crippled America's oil industry. And then on top of that, they went off and declared war on Russia through the Ukraine. And with their sanctions, they destroyed the world's energy market and sent prices soaring. Just a series of catastrophically stupid actions. Now, the Sri Lanka thing that I mentioned earlier is tied into all this. You see, Sri Lanka was one of the most prosperous Asian nations. It was a shining example of an Asian nation without a caste system, without communism, without a significant amount of poverty, that was somewhat self-sufficient. The Sri Lankans borrow a lot of money from the IMF, but they were quasi-self-sufficient. They grew their own food, and they had a decent economy, a decent middle class. So the son of the outgoing prime minister, he's a libertard. And there is a movement among libertards now to eliminate fertilizers. Their fertilizer of choice to eliminate is nitrogen. And if you don't have nitrogen, food doesn't grow.
Nothing.
It just doesn't grow. And so he forced the elimination of fertilizer in Sri Lanka because he was going to be, the next stalwart for climate change. Well, guess what? No food.
No, they all starved.
No food.
Yeah.
The farmers couldn't produce food, and so there's no domestic crop. And then they tried to import food, but their response to COVID, where they shut people down and spent money like drunken sailors, there were no international currency reserves to buy food. So they had no money to buy food because of the libertard response to COVID, and because of their mismanagement of farming, they had no food that they were growing, and the people were starving, which is why the insurrection
revolted. Yeah.
Yep. So this is what happens when you have numbskulls over government. It sounds funny to say we have weekend at Bernie's, and we have the dumbest woman in the history of humankind as the Vice President of the United States, and Kamala Harris, until you realize that these numbskulls are handicapping the country, and it is causing rampant inflation. We're headed towards recession. Our currency is in free fall. We are in a mess.
Yeah.
Supply lines are destroyed. Work ethic is gone. Yeah, we're in a mess. So it's a serious concern.
Yeah.
All right, let's return, Kirk, where we were. It was.
Okay.
I want to backtrack just a little bit so we can keep our context. We were in Yasha Yah, and what we're doing here is going through Yahweh's frustration. So we have some idea as to why the timing of things are playing out the way they are, moving towards Yahweh's return in year 6,000 Yah. We have a lot of things that are stacking up right against his return. This project where I was asked to do this on Towrah in 2021 will be 32 years from the time that I was called to do it to the time that I'll get retired. Happened to be the same amount of time that Yosef was a vizier in Egypt. Yeah, preparing for the good times. Yeah, and for the times of the lean times. So we've got a lot, over a very long period of time, because the history of humankind and God's interaction with us plays out over 6,000 years, plus a seventh, the celebration of Sukkah. And so over the 7,000 years, we have these really intense, concentrated moments. And we had the intense, concentrated moment with the formation of the covenant with Abraham, with the children of Israel during the Yatza Exodus coming into the Promised Land, their time with Dod as they transition from Shamuel to King Saul, to Dod, and then to Solomon, a very intense period where many wonderful things and many terrible things occurred, followed by a precipitous fall for Israel, and then that would be followed by just this prolonged tumbling into the abyss, where they got further and further from God, and God drew further and further away from them, and there was no communication. And God essentially says, for better part of 2,700 years, there was almost no one. And if you go for 2,400 to 2,500 years after Malachi, there was no one. There wasn't a single person that Yahweh could find that was willing to listen to him. And if you're not willing to listen to him, then you can't speak for him. Kind of this interesting dichotomy here, but you can't speak for him unless you're willing to listen to him. And if you don't listen to him, you ought not even pretend to be speaking for him. So there would be not a single Yisraelite, not a single Yehudim for 2,450 to 2,500 years, bringing us to the precipice of the time of Yaakov's troubles. And so Yirmiyah is one of 5 or 6 prophets that invests an enormous amount of his time trying to tell us what to expect as we approach Yahweh's return. One of the topics that he particularly likes to cover is the fact that there will be a witness again. Not going to be another prophet, not going to be a Yisraelite, not going to be somebody that is from the tribe of Yahud. There's going to be a witness that is going to pick up Yahweh's message and proclaim it to his people prior to his return. And for Yashayah, this is actually a big deal. When we think about future prophecy, we want to think about the Magog War. We want to think about Armageddon. And by the way, Armageddon may be the Magog War because the Magog War is the one that's fought in the valley of Megiddo.
Megiddo, yeah.
And it's actually in the Jezreel Valley. Megiddo is part of the Jezreel Valley. But we want to think about all of the pandemics and one world governance and the treaty that forces Israel to shrink in size, the onslaught of Muslims into the country, these various wars, and how the sun and moon are going to darken with atomic conflagration. And we'll think about those are the big events. Those are the kind of stuff you could sell tickets to a movie. You could make a movie called Armageddon, couldn't you?
Yeah,
you could.
So
that's book sales. That's the late great Planet Earth. Hal Lindsey's.
I remember Hal.
Yeah. Oh, what was the Left Behind series? Those guys made a fortune. Yes, telling people lies. The bottom line is that's not the thing that's actually the most interesting to Yashayah. The thing that's most interesting to Yashayah is, okay, here I've been telling my people their religion is separating them from Yahweh. And so long as they're religious, Yahweh's not going to speak with them, is not going to interact with them. But in the end, Yahweh is going to return. He's going to return with Dode. And when he does, you're going to have separated yourself from religion and politics and accepted the terms and conditions of the covenant to be among those whom who he wraps his arms around upon his return, as opposed to dying. And Yashayah's view is that, therefore, the role that is played by this non-Yisraelite messenger is important. And he wants his people to recognize that he will exist and that he will be empowered and enlightened by the Spirit of Yahweh, that collectively they're going to write a nesh, which is a sign that's going to be lifted up in the last days, and that this fellow is a stem, a choder, a sucker, if you will, that's growing out of the old rootstock that is rooted and grounded in Israel, but that is particularly aligned with what we know about Dode. So this is important to him, and I think because of the way that not a single Israelite responded to Yashayah during his life, and then he was able to see that none responded thereafter, that he is somehow tickled, pleased that Yahweh would use a goy to get his people's attention. It's kind of like, all right, serves you right. Serves you right. That's really a pretty cool move. So we're going to hear a lot about this. This is it's a big issue with the prophet Yashayah. So this goes on, and to be in all fairness to Yashayah doesn't say a lot. most of what is in Yashayah is Yahweh speaking. So he's simply recording what Yashayah says. But, with every prophet, you get a little flavor of their personality coming through.
Yes.
So here's the question that is being asked in Yashayah 41:26. Who has been informative, conspicuously reporting from the source, that we may choose to know? The Yada. And without turning away, so that we might say, this is right, Sadak. Indeed, it has been disheartening that there was no one who made this informative declaration. It has also been discouraging that there was no one who would even listen.
Yeah.
It has been aggravating that there were none willing to hear your words. Now, this is actually in Yashayah's voice. He is now assessing the situation that he has witnessed. And for anyone that would say, how dare you claim that this prophecy is about you, I would turn it around and say, how dare you refuse to listen to Yahweh? Yeah, how dare you?
That's absolutely
how dare
perfect.
you refuse to be among those who refuse to listen?
He told you to listen to this witness. Yes.
How dare you?
Identifies him.
Well, even forget this witness. Yashayah is saying there was no one willing to listen. There was no one willing to share the message conspicuously. That's your fault. If you're a Yisraelite, it is your fault. God couldn't find a single one, which means it's every one of your fault. It's not just the leadership. It's not just the rabbis.
He was taking anyone that tried, stood up.
Heck, he worked with Yirmiyahu when he was a kid. He worked with Dod when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And he worked with Moshe when he was an old man.
Point taken.
So you don't have an excuse. He worked with Deborah. You don't have an excuse if you're a woman. She was extraordinary. So I would say, rather than say, how dare you, I would say, what's wrong with you?
How dare you?
Need to listen?
Yeah, what's wrong? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So, who has been informative, conspicuous reporting from the source that we may choose to know, and without turning away, so that we might say this is right? Well, I would tell you that if there is something out there in addition to Yada Yahowah doing this, that declares Yahweh's name correctly, vociferously, often, that declares the purpose of each of the 7 Moed Mikra, that declares the timing of Yahweh's fulfillment of those Moed Mikra, that speaks of the 5 terms and conditions of the covenant and its benefits, that explains that the purpose of the Torah is to teach and to guide, and that can interpret the prophets correctly and will speak boldly about the realization that God's single greatest frustration with his people is their propensity to be religious. Yeah. And if you can find another source like that, then I say, wonderful. I wish there was. I wish there were hundreds. I wish there were thousands. At this time, there are not. But at least there is this one. Indeed, it is disheartening that no one made an informative declaration. That it has been discouraging that there was no one who would even listen. It has been aggravating that there were none willing to hear your words. 41:27 says, initially for Zion, there was a lack of awareness. So on behalf of Jerusalem, I wanted to offer a herald, an ordinary person, to proclaim the news. So as we make our way through this, we hear that in Zion there was a lack of awareness. Now, if any place there should not be a lack of awareness is Zion. Zion means signs posted along the way.
Along the way.
Those signs are posted on the ridgeline of Moriah, between Dod's home and Yahowah's. They could not be more conspicuous. They could not be more important. Initially, for Zion, there was a lack of awareness. So, on behalf of all Jerusalem, the source from which guidance and teaching regarding reconciliation flows, I wanted to offer Nathan. I constantly sought to provide a herald, a basar, an ordinary person to proclaim the news, a mortal being who will convey information which is remarkably positive. Yashayah 41:27. Bashar is such a marvelous term because it is so very Yah. Bashar can be translated in one of two ways. Its primary meaning is to speak out, to convey a message, to be a witness. Mm-hmm. That's the primary meaning of Bashar. The secondary meaning is flesh, animal, mortal, person, body, those kinds of things, physical. Physical mortal person. So here you've got, whether this is in Yahweh's words or still in Yashayah's words, it's Yashayah is being inspired by Yahweh, so there's not much of a difference other than I actually prefer it in Yashayah's voice because it's more fitting with Basar and more fitting with Yahweh. Yahweh does not like to work alone. Yahweh would prefer to communicate through the likes of Yashayah than he would bellow out his message directly to his people. He would prefer to work with a basar, an ordinary mortal who was could be used to convey a message. That's what he likes. And you could say, well, why do I want to listen to a person? Because that's the way God works. If you don't want to listen to a person, you ain't going to hear from God. That's how he chooses to work. He tried the I'm going to speak to them directly mode.
And it scared him to death.
Oh, God, they hated it. They just hated it.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. And so God actually realized, God didn't just say, well, I'm a little ticked that you don't want to listen to me talk. God didn't say that at all. God's comment to his people was, you're right. I shouldn't be talking to you directly. It's much better that I speak through somebody. And the reason for that is when God speaks directly to a group of people, it's intimidating. I don't care how much you love him, how well you know him. He's God. That's a big, daggone voice up there.
Deep voice.
Okay?
Yes.
And, he can see right into you. He knows what you're thinking. That's vulnerable, man. Okay? And so that's not God's style. He doesn't want to overwhelm us. He doesn't want us to be afraid. He doesn't want us to bow down. He doesn't want us to do any of that kind of stuff. He wants us just to listen to him. And so since the entire purpose of creation was to enjoy a family relationship where he could do things with his children, because that's what he enjoys, then the best way for him to operate is to do stuff with his children and to communicate his message through them. But there's also a benefit. And being a basar here, I'm telling you that I am actually a benefit to you, even though you might think that wouldn't it be better if you just got it directly from God. I don't blame you for having that point of view, but there is actually a benefit. And I've come to appreciate this the more I listen to what Dode and Moshe had to say in particular, but also when I listen to my buddy here, Yashayah, and that is they add a human flavor. They make it real. they say it in such a way that it resonates with me. God is not a human. And so it's kind of like God saying, all right, what I want to do is communicate, or like us saying, I want to communicate to an ant. But how do I know really what the ant wants? And how am I going to communicate so that the other ants will be interested and listen? Well, the best way would be to find a really willing ant and to have that ant convey the message based upon...
go tell them.
Go tell them. As one of them, go tell them. And tell that story in a way that will resonate with them. Moshe was spectacular. Dode was spectacular. Lived his life to the fullest. Inspired, brilliant, articulate, courageous. And so God got to say, this is what my guidance and my teaching will do for an individual. You can be this individual. And not only am I showing you what it's like to work with me, to be inspired by me, to be emboldened by me, to be empowered by me, I'm also communicating to you in a way that you're more likely to understand. Part of this, too, is I've always said, I'm not here to dumb it down. People say, create a short version of it. Can you just dumb the whole thing down for us so we can get this? And I said, no, I won't do that. But the fact is, I am doing that.
Well,
that is my job, is to dumb it down. God is so much smarter than I am, than we are, so much smarter, that one of the reasons he communicates to people is so we can dumb it down a bit. So consider me your dumber. But that's part of it. I've been studying a lot of what Moshe did, and Moshe had some meltdowns later in his life. Dode had a lot of meltdowns later in his life. And those meltdowns are really instructive. A great one here is that we've all heard of the story, and a lot of people have struggled with the story of the serpents. The serpents were biting the people. They don't know why that God would have that happen, and then how the cure was Moshe was supposed to make allegedly this flaming serpent and set it on a stick. There's some problems with that story. One is there's two words for serpent, and one of them is snake, and the other one of them speaks of burning. And so when you have a venomous snake that is killing people with its bite, the thing that is burning is the venom. And so what Yahweh asked Moshe to do was to put the venom not on a stick, but on a sign. What is the antidote now for snake bite? The snake's venom. That's what we use. That's how we build the antidote. And so he's saying, if you understand that this is the antidote for that bite, and you look at this symbol, then you're facing problem. You're not running away from it anymore. You have a chance to understand it, and it won't kill you. But Moshe, unfortunately, put a model of the snake on a pole as opposed to following Yahweh's instructions to put the venom on a sign. It's just like striking the rock versus speaking to the rock. It was a very big difference from Yahweh's point of view. Now, Yahweh didn't condemn him, and just like when he struck the rock, he still quenched the people's thirst. And when he took the wrong imagery, he still cured the people. But Moshe, towards the end of it, wore out. It was part of this thing that, Kirk, you and I have been talking about in this program, that because this is obviously talking about what we're doing here, and therefore you cannot claim anonymity when you're the only person that qualifies for the prophecy. And what I told you...
whether you can even translate it that way.
Yeah.
Can you figure it out from the translation? Yeah.
Right. As much as you would like to say it was a lot more fun and relaxing being anonymous, because anonymous, hey, if at the end of the day, if I translated one statement and wrote something cogent about it, I had a good day. But now there is a time certain that I need to be completed, and to begin to circulate this information and to have a body of work that Yahweh can be pleased with to awaken his people, there's a time certain, and therefore there's a pace that has to be adhered to, and therefore you got to get started shortly after sunrise, and you got to go to after sunset, and you got to do that each day, because now there's a responsibility. And I don't want to give the impression that this is a burden, because it is the best job in the world. And if I could go back to the anonymous, I would still be doing it, because it is the best job in the world. It's the most rewarding job in the world. And no one was listening, and no one benefited other than myself and my buddy Kirk here and my wife and a few friends. I'd still do it enthusiastically. But I want to tell you, there is a tremendous difference in one's mindset when there is a responsibility. We received a letter from a listener down under who's read all 22 of the rewritten books. I mean, they average 600 pages, and they're dense reads, so that's a lot. And he was disappointed in me, saddened for me, to say that one of my motivations is that I don't want to disappoint to Dad. And it is. I make no bones about it. I am motivated both by carrot and stick. The carrot is, this is the most fun thing in the world. Each day I get a chance to see things that no one has seen in thousands of years, and to write about them, and then and the week end I get to share them. And growing and enjoying it and seeing the satisfaction among my family and the covenant and with Yahweh is exceedingly rewarding. That's the carrot. The stick is, we don't get a makeover here. So what this is, we did get a makeover. This is our final one. We're running out of time.
Yes.
There is now 11 years left. And 3 of those years are going to be very hellish. And I'm going to be in a very different role. Well, same role, but different method.
Different.
And so, yeah. For the most part now, I don't have 11 years. I've got 8 years. It's a lot to do in 8 years. There's still considerably more to write and to share. And so there is a responsibility to get it done. And there's the sense of, I've got all eternity to rest, all eternity to vacation. So long as I have my health and we don't have natural calamity here, and I'm able to focus, God, I don't want to disappoint Dad. I don't want the harvest to occur and there just be a handful of people there, and God's disappointed that it should have been more because we should have done better. So it is, even here as we talk about the Bashar, just like Bashar is uplifting, God's saying, I want a messenger.
Yeah, he proclaimed the news.
And I want that messenger to be a man. Yeah. He's a humble man sharing powerful message. It's this combination of pride and humility. It's tied up right there in that word. And there's an enormous amount of pride and humility in what we're doing. There is a complete dependence and yet complete independence. Hard to imagine those two things. But with Yahweh, we have total liberty. And yet the more dependent we are, the more effective we are.
Yeah.
So
sounds like opposites, but it's really not. It
really isn't. No.
He helps and lets you grow.
Right.
He's helping you grow. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Initially for Zion, there was a lack of awareness. So and this is initially was Rishon. So in the beginning, for a long time thereafter, for Zion, there was a lack of awareness. So on behalf of Jerusalem, the apple of Yah's eyes, I wanted to offer Nathan. I sought to provide. Consider this Yahweh's gift.
Yes.
A herald, an ordinary person to proclaim the news of Basar. Now, as I shared, it's always Yah's preference to work through his people. But sometimes, through no fault of his own, his desires are thwarted. And this time, rather than a Nabi, a prophet, he would offer a Basar, herald, an ordinary fellow tasked with an extraordinary mission of being a witness. Now, I know that my buddy, maybe it's not polite to call Yeshayah the greatest of prophets, my buddy, but I like the guy. I feel an affinity to him.
You can read it.
Yeah, I like the guy. I think that Yeshayah is not the only person likes the idea that after everything Yahweh had to endure with Yisrael, and the fact that he's still willing to reconcile his relationship with Yisrael, that it's really appropriate that they be called back home by a goy. I actually think that when Yahweh has to deal with the disappointment of his people not responding to him, that this was a choice that he made, and I don't think he's the least bit. I think he's very disappointed with his people, but he's not disappointed in the choice. Not that the choice was a quality individual, so much as that just the whole idea of approaching his arrogant, stubborn, religious
whiny
with a goy is pretty delicious. But when I looked, there was not a single individual. I think this is still Yeshayah's voice, by the way. Not one among them who could provide thoughtful guidance, even respond by speaking when I asked them. That's sad, isn't it? I mean, it's
that's really bad.
Millions and millions and millions of Israelites and Yehudim, and not one. The chosen people chose to be disassociated from God. And they did so over a protracted period of time, some 2,500 years. And since Yah isn't about to force anyone to listen to him, much less speak for him, there would be a resounding silence between God and humankind over the millennia. Now, those who were afforded every advantage, they should actually be embarrassed. It should hurt to read these words, to hear these words. And trying to whisk it all away by disparaging the speaker and saying that, the way that you're speaking of Judaism is anti-Semitic, it's just not going to work. He is Hashem, the name, and the one who created and named Shem. So here's Yeshayah, Isaiah 41:29. Behold, they are all delusional. Their customs, their occupations, their achievements, their works, their ambitions, their practices are all nothing but that of ruinous and destructive spirits, of false gods. That is God's view of Judaism and the religions Judaism spawned. Judaism is responsible for spawning Christianity and Islam. And an argument could be made also for communism, socialist secular humanism. And God said they're all delusional. They're all deceitful. Their customs, their occupations, their achievements are nothing but that of the ruinous and destructive spirit of their false gods. Judaism is credited for being a monotheistic religion, and some will say, "Well, the first monotheistic religion." That's not really true. There's really no distinction between worshiping one false god and many false gods. There were times in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
they have one god.
Amun-Ra.
Amun-Ra.
Yeah, he was supposed to be a singular deity. There were times in cultures where there was a singular god. Of course, Christianity went back to a triune god. That was pretty clever of them. In Islam, Allah is started off as the Lord, and then Ar-Rahman, and then Ar-Rahim, and then Allah. So, and then by the time you get to the satanic verses, they're Manat, Al-Uzza, and Alat. But the fact of the matter is that while in Judaism today they would say, we're not pagan, we have a singular God. Yeah, in fact, a singular dash in the middle of his non-name.
It's not.
Trust me, God's not impressed that you're worshiping a singular false god versus many false gods.
Yeah.
It really, listen, when the prophets of Baal were killed, it wasn't because, they were also the prophets of Asherah, because Asherah had her own prophets. These were the prophets of Baal. That was their god. So they had a god. Having one god didn't prevail. It was the wrong god.
Didn't help.
Yep.
No.
So one of the things that we find is not only is it true in Yeshaya, but it's true in Hosea, it's true in Zechariah, it's true in the Torah, is that God's number one problem with his people is their propensity to be religious. And in this particular case, the reason no one was listening to him, the reason that he viewed his people as delusional and deceitful, the reason that he was opposed to their occupations and achievements is because they were opining the beliefs associated with false gods. And there's Ruach is also here. There is spiritual Judaism, and rabbinic Judaism has embraced the Zohar. The Mount Merion calamity, where 50, 60 people were trampled to death, was because several 100,000 Haredim flocked to the gravesite of Yochi, the alleged author of the Zohar. Now, he didn't write the Zohar any more than Akiba did. He was written in Spain in the 11th century. But nonetheless, in the mythical world of make-believe, he is credited, and so they go to his tomb on the day of his death every year and celebrate this Zohar, which is Jewish spirituality. And I'm going to tell you, God does not like spirituality, because spirituality is almost always focused on the wrong spirit. In fact, I would say it's always focused on the wrong spirit.
Agreed.
So let's make no mistake, God is disparaging Judaism. He views the religion of the rabbis as ruinous and destructive. Worse, Yahweh is revealing the God Jews claim to worship is modeled after a demonic spirit. Therefore, rather than announce the arrival of the Passover lamb, the prelude to the prophecy is explaining the reason Yahweh selected a Bashar. Now, the reason I just made that statement is that we're in this to understand what follows. This is a prophecy that's going to get us into Yeshaya 42 that is a misappropriated prophecy, wrongly attributed to the Christian Jesus. And by going into 41 and seeing what God said, you see the preamble of this is Yahweh saying, my people are so lost, I couldn't find a single one of them to listen to me and to convey my message. So I had to choose a Bashar named Yada. And so that is where we are here. His people were unwilling to listen to him. So taken out of context, the prophecy which follows is often claimed on behalf of Jesus when it is like so many others. It speaks about Yahweh's enduring relationship with his beloved son, the Messiah, Dod. As we will soon discover, Dod David is Yahweh's chosen one. Yahweh's Spirit came upon him the day he was anointed as the Messiah and has remained throughout his life. Therefore, it is Dod who will be returning with Yah to judge the nations. So, Kirk, unless you've got something you want to explain based on the words we've read, we're about ready to jump into Yeshaya 42, which was our destination.
No, we're good. This is good. Carry on, please.
Okay. So 42:1 reads, "Pay close attention, hen, because my associate, whom I uphold, whom I have chosen, my soul delights in him. I have placed my Spirit upon him. He will come forth, judge those of different ethnicities and cultures. La ha goyim." Okay, so are we aware of anyone whom Yahweh referred to as a Bashir? I have chosen him.
I have chosen him. He anointed him. He's Dod.
Yeah. Yahweh says, Dod is my chosen one.
I picked him.
He says that
they picked Saul. He picked him.
Yeah, he says, this is the one that I have chosen. My soul delights in him. Yahweh has told us that he is the one that he is going to uphold. He has, in the 9th chapter, where, it reads, a child is born, a son is given. The son who is given is Dod. He is God's gift to humankind. And he will come forth to judge, Mishpat, the Goyim. So that would mean
take that, Christianity.
That for darn sure that he is not coming on behalf of a Christian church, and it isn't Jesus.
No.
Dod. Pretend for a moment that we want to take this to the Christian interpretation, where the Christian would rob this prophecy from Dod, replacement theology, and give it to their Jesus. How would it be possible for God to have chosen Jesus if he is Jesus? How could God uphold Jesus if he is Jesus? How could Yahweh's soul delight in him if Yahweh's soul was in him?
It's a little odd, don't you think?
How could Yahweh place his Spirit in him and upon him if he was him?
How could he come back with himself?
Yeah. I mean, come on,
stupid.
folks. He's talking about somebody. Pay close attention, he says. He even starts at pay close attention, because my associate. Would you refer to, okay, I have a right arm and a left arm. I'm going to say that my right arm is my associate. That's my coworker, man.
Okay.
So if Jesus is supposed to be God, how in the heck can he be a coworker? The one person that Yahweh says all the time, he is my servant, he is my co-worker, is Dod, Ebed.
Yeah.
So my co-worker, Dod, whom I uphold, Dod, whom I have Bashar, chosen, Dod, whom my soul enjoys and delights in him, Dod. I have placed my Spirit upon him. First thing Yahweh says, anoint him, and my Spirit's coming on him, and never going to leave him.
Never going to leave. Yeah.
And he will go forth and be brought back to judge
wow.
those of different
now, there's a clue.
And cultures. Yeah, there's a clue.
Pay. Well, you have to go back to the start. It says pay close attention.
Yeah. Now, the coolest thing about this job, Kirk, is that I don't think anyone has derived all of these profound insights out of that prophecy in a couple of thousand years.
I agree.
And they're there. They're bold. They're fun. They're exciting. They're enlightening. They're
easy to look up.
They're reassuring. They're all these wonderful things, and nobody has derived that. Why? Because the rabbis are blind to this. That's the last thing that they want is for Dowd to come back, because it screws up the whole thing about this unknown Messiah. If it's Dowd, well, they should have known that. And of course,
very embarrassing.
They don't like the fact that Yahweh would delight in him and not them. And for Christians, they can't deal with this at all, because they really need this to be their guy. But when you go through it, it can't be their guy. No. So most have been led to believe that God will judge the nations. But God said otherwise. According to Yahweh, his chosen one, the one he has accepted and upheld, the one who pleases him, the one whose company he enjoys, the one who has received his spirit, is the one that's going to return to judge the Gentiles. There's only one such individual. One individual who meets all of these criteria. It's David. So even in judgment, God's not going to work alone.
Yeah.
It is, by the way, Dowd's the coolest cat who ever lived. He is just the coolest, most interesting man in the history of the world. And I love studying Dowd. And some people say, well, you got a bromance with him. No, I want to tell you something. The last person I'd want to be is Dowd. Talk about responsibility. That guy. I am so glad.
Light on his shoulder.
When Dowd comes back and say, man, they're yours. I'm going to go take a vacation. They are. I read the story. I read the script. I know your role. They're yours. See you later. Oh, by the way, there's a lot of really wonderful people here, and I'm going to take some of the best ones. Hope you don't mind. We're going to go play for a while. But it's his job, man.
Yeah.
There's a reason Dowd wore it down at the end of his life. That's a tough darn job.
That's tough job.
Yeah. He will not scream or shout. Okay, well, he'd be different than me, because I do like to scream and shout. Nor will he raise his voice such that it is heard in the open or broad way. I actually think that Dowd was an introvert. My Meyer-Briggs wife, who loves to give all labels, is probably going to say, no, you're crazy. But maybe he's my kind of introvert, which is that I like people. I like to be around people. I like to be around small groups of interesting people and not out there. The last thing I want to do is be out in a whole group of people on the broad way. That is not my thing.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I find it really draining, and I think Dowd found it draining. I know Yosha found it draining. Everything we read about him. Oh my God, can we get out of this crowd? Let's go and
let's
get away from these people.
Have to walk across the water.
Whew, yeah, I'll do anything to get away from these people. But I will go out of my way to be with people I want to hang with. That's kind of my thing. So it's a selective
wonderful
introvert,
dinner
extrovert.
parties.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah, too many people. It's no longer fun anymore. A small, intimate group. It is interesting people. So I don't think that Dowd will want to be heard in the broad and open way. I don't think he can shout at all. I don't think he needs to at that point. And likewise, the last thing you want to do is be communicating to people in the broad and open way. yesterday, Leah was working on an animation. It was a menorah that was going to point to each of the mikra, and it was going to be animated and go to the various parts of these books that talk about these things. And she had found an animator, and the guy had agreed to do this. Then he went to the site and he wrote this long dissertation on. I'm a Christian. I couldn't do this. I'm Seventh-day Adventist. My faith is in Jesus, the Jewish carpenter. And it went on and on and on. And Leah, of course, got frustrated. She wanted to, just slap him with the back of the hand with, what in the world is wrong with you, idiot? How could you go to the book, for example, Messiah, which speaks of Dowd, and not be inspired by it? Or not go to one of the books on questioning Paul and not recognize that Paul really was a scallywag. Yeah. And what I told her is, don't leave him alone. Just walk away. It does no good to speak openly in the broad and open way. The broad and open way is the religious way. It's the political way. It's the way of most people. And you don't want to waste your breath. All you're going to do is make them angry, and you have no chance of helping them. Nothing you can say, even if you're citing God, is going to make a difference.
It took me a long time to get there. I mean, in the early years, I just couldn't understand. Well, don't you understand? And they go, I got Jesus. Leave me alone.
No. Well, it's like this fellow that had read the 22 books that wrote from Down Under. If you really love the covenant, love Yahweh, love His testimony, His Torah and prophets, you're going to immerse yourself in it, and you're going to read it, and it's fun to read, and you can't wait to the next page and what you're going to learn next. It's a marvelous journey, and so here's a guy that is celebrating it because, well, he wants to know more about God. But the other fellow, you could have said anything. This is what God says. He calls Paul the plague of death. Why are you listening to him? That would mean nothing with somebody in the open and broad way. So Dowd's not going to be out there soliciting Gentiles. He ain't going to be preaching to the church. He will not be inviting them to join him or summoning them to his God. The time for that is long over. He will be condemning the church, which has sought to replace him and his people. We know this to be the case because Christianity is the broad and open way. The faithful haven't listened to Yahweh or His Son, and that isn't going to change. Those who have nothing to contribute shout, like the progressive protesters who chant slogans in the street, while those who know better share what they have learned in a voice whose amplitude resonates with those willing to listen. Now, I even think that, I was kidding about that I shout sometimes. Even in shouting, you have to be really careful. You have to modulate what you're saying, because if everything is a shout, you will just scare people away. Right. Yeah. If you're going to, first of all, Yahweh's preference overwhelmingly is written communication. We are sharing what we have written. So there is a written record of everything that you're listening to here, and you're encouraged to read it, because by reading it, you're going to learn a lot more. You can verify it. You can dig in deep. You can get the high-level view and then dive deep for the details. It vastly superior written word. But if you're going to reach out to people in today's world, you do need a spoken component. And when you have that spoken component, you do have to be a little careful, because if your tone is always low and monotone, you're not going to encourage anybody to listen to you at all. And if you're shouting all the time, you're just going to drive people away and say, what's with that maniac? It does require a point of emphasis. You need to know when to raise your voice, when to speak swiftly, when to speak slowly, when to pause, and when to be quiet. And Dode will be a master of those things. He's one of the greatest linguists in the history of the world. Now, those who know what Yahweh has conveyed share what they have learned in a voice whose amplitude will consistently resonate with those who are willing to listen. So in this next statement, the harassed stem, which has been extended, may be a reference to the beleaguered choder described previously. The previous prophecy in Yashaya seemed to suggest that he may be among the witnesses who will be badgered by the world, which is at this point completely spun out of control. The mistreated stem, which has been extended, the Kane Ratzatz, the harassed branch and ill-treated shoot, which has been brought forth, will never cease to be harmed or suffer. He's not going to be touched, much less broken or destroyed, because no one will make physical contact. His confidence and courage will not falter. When I wrote this, it was really a thoughtful letter, so I'm sorry I keep on bringing it up, but it just touched so many chords that I thought would be interesting for other people to know because, again, Yahweh chooses to work through people, whether you like those people or not, whether you see nothing but their flaws or you see nothing but their strengths or somewhere in between. That's just God's style. And as we saw when we started this prophecy tonight, God wants his people to intervene into the story, to put themselves into the story so we can see it from their perspective, so that we have this means of it playing out at a level that we can understand, that we can relate to. And so it is important, since he said, I want this Basar to do this, and I'm going to tell you about the role that he's going to play, that you get a little flavor of what it's like to be in that role. And one of the things that I shared pertains to this. There are 4 Zeroah, and 3 of the 4 had responsibility that is so vastly greater than anything I can possibly imagine. Moshe, Dode, and Yosha. And when I talk about, I began to say, now I sense the responsibility. I want to report, I don't want to disappoint my father, and I want him to be pleased with the number of, and the quality, mostly the quality, of Yehudim and Israelites who are reconciled with him upon his return. In all honesty, the responsibility that I have is minuscule compared to them. Absolutely minuscule. I sit here on a tropical island in the middle of the Caribbean with this panoramic view of the ocean and a marvelous office surrounded by nothing but love, and with all the wonderful technology to support this effort, and a beautiful home with a wonderful wife, and I just have this marvelous life and this perfect environment. I mean, God could not have created a better. I guess He could, but trust me, the environment that He created for me to do this is really, really good.
That's close
and so, that's part of what's being conveyed here. You take on this role, you're going to be like every one of Yah's witnesses. You are going to be mistreated. People are going to say really crappy things about you. I've had 10,000 death threats. A lot of people have said a lot of crappy things over the years, some of which I may have deserved. I don't know. But nonetheless, that goes with the territory. And if it bugs you, you ought not sit in this seat, because you're going to get a lot of it. And part of it gets to be the point where you say, I don't really care what you say because I know who I'm working for, and so we're going to go full speed ahead. But in doing this, I recognize that no one has ever spoken out under their own name as openly as I did in Prophet of Doom and survived it, and I never had to duck.
No, it's a remarkable thing.
It's just remarkable. Yeah, it's just astounding.
Can't happen,
or
but it did.
to undermine the establishment the way that we have for so many years politically, to undermine the religion of Christianity in addition to Islam, in addition to Judaism, as we have done, and to sit here free.
And live to do it again. Yeah, great.
And have the opportunity to do it again. It is a living testament of the veracity of this. And, of course, the veracity of this was underpinned that very first day back in 2001 with the 91st Mizmor, which, was very clear that if you are willing to accept a job that he once accomplished, then he is going to make certain that you're protected. He's not going to make certain that your health is perfect, because if he were to do things that where every aspect of your life was just Fruit Loops, then you're not going to have any character. You're not going to have any empathy. You're not going to that human basar element that helps dumb it down and make it resonate with people so that we can all understand. You're not going to have any of that. So you've got to have right. So you've got to have aches and pains in your life, but he's just not going to allow you to be put out of commission, and he's not going to give you so much that you're distracted from the purpose, because the purpose is, in many cases, far, far, far bigger than the individual. So the mistreated stem, which has been extended, the harassed branch and shoot, which has been wrought for it, will never cease, never be harmed nor suffer. Not going to be touched, much less broken or destroyed, and no one will make physical contact. His confidence and courage will not falter. Boy, I will tell you, that is the truth. This restoring and glowing wick, he will not allow to be quenched. This restoring and glowing wick, that is just enough light to illuminate the world if you're looking for it. And with a single light like that, you can get an entire fire glowing. And you can ignite so many others with a similar passion. And God says, I'm not going to allow that to be quenched. He will reliably, truthfully, and steadfastly, honestly and dependably, verifiably and perpetually bring forth and disseminate Yatzah, the operative term of the Exodus, because there is a new Exodus, the means to make informed and rational decisions, Mishpat. Kirk, when we began this on that statement that mentioned the role that a Yada would play, and then it went right to the Bashar, this human herald, you'd say, okay, well, that's obviously it's talking about us, and let's hope that we do a good job. This is actually more descriptive of our time and place. It is actually more descriptive. This is God saying, this is how the world is going to react to him. This is how I'm going to support him. This is the fire that he is igniting. And I'm going to tell you, it's never going to be quenched. I am not going to allow this fire to be quenched, no matter what you think you might want to do. You're wasting your time if you think you can put it out. And then he says, because of what Yahweh is doing for this individual, and he's not doing it for the individual, he's doing it because he wants the Nesh sign lifted up on behalf of his people, so that his reunion with Yisrael and Yehudah on Yom Kippurim in year 6000 Yah is a spectacular party with wonderful, wonderful people. He's saying that what you're hearing is reliable. It is truthful. It is consistent. It's verifiable. Why is it those things? Because everything that we're saying is based upon Yahweh's words. What are we reading here? We're reading the words that Yahshua wrote 2,700 years ago. So the reason what we're saying is reliable and true and trustworthy and dependable and verifiable is because we're not sharing something that we claim fell out of the sky or some plate that some spirit dug up in the forest. We're not looking into the volcano. No, this is reading, studying, considering, translating Yahweh's prophets, whom he proved that he inspired. Pardon, Kurt?
May I interject a little something here?
Sure.
You're doing verse 42:3, and I have, when you're reading, I have on my computer, I pull up a interlineary, and it's not that and people used to ask all the time, well, which Bible do you recommend? I say, well, this one. Read these translations. And what you will find if you're new to this or fairly new to this is, I can find the number of Mishpat 49:41, and it'll translate it as justice. But when you read Mishpat here, we're talking about the means to inform and make rational decisions. Then you go on to expand it, good judgment regarding the plan, helping to decide. So not only you go on and on and on, you add everything that I can find in all these lexicons that are right to my right and also on my computer, and I can come up with the same thing, and I do. And I do this for my sake, going over the stuff you have, just so I can make little speeches like this. And that when you read this, you'll get so much depth. You can compare it anywhere you want with all these lexicons and interlinearies and things. And it is just such a joy. It makes so much sense. It is the best presentation of God's Word you'll find anywhere in the world. Period.
And you can,
no one's doing this.
Beyond even the lexicons. For example, Mishpat.
You have to think your way through it.
Okay, Mishpat is a wonderful term. Mishpat is one of many Hebrew words that is a compound word. It is based on Shaphat. No one denies that it's based on Shaphat. Shaphat means to decide, to think, to judge, to exercise good judgment, to determine between right and wrong, good and bad, useful versus counterproductive. It is the method of making a quality decision is Shaphat. And the MI is from my that precedes it, and it's an interrogatory. It encourages us to ask the who, what, where, why, and when, as well as how questions regarding exercising good judgment. So if we were to ponder, how do we make good decisions? Well, the first thing that you need to make a good decision is reliable, truthful information. What preceded this? He will bring forth reliably, Yatzah, which is the same word as for Exodus. That's the word that we translate Exodus. He will bring forth reliable and truthful information. Why? So that we can make a rational and informed decision. That is the entire purpose we are here. We want everyone who is listening, and particularly Israelites and Yehudim, but every Goyim is welcome, to be able to have access to accurate translations, truthful insights, consistent and verifiable conclusions, so that you can make an informed decision about who Yahweh is, what he's offering, and what he expects of us in return. Yahshua 42:3 is just as was 42:2 2, it is a summation of who we are and what we're doing. This is a restoring and glowing wick God himself will not allow to be quenched. And so long as we, between now and the time he returns, we will continue to bring reliable translations, truthful insights, and dependable conclusions that you can use to make an informed decision about Yahweh. Nothing you can do in your life is more important than that. Yeah, so Yahweh has a lot to say about this episode and the lives of his people. Because quite frankly, this is the final chapter of his original Torah teaching. It is now or never for the chosen people. Even with the luxury of time, 3,000 years since the previous kingdom of Dod, God could not find a single solitary Jew who would listen to him. And now, between Chag Matzah and Towrah in 2022, only 11 orbits around the sun remain for Jews to see the light. And for all of those, the world is going to be extremely off-kilter. So you're going to need some focus. You're going to need a handrail. With reconciliations in 2033, October 2nd, 6:22 p.m., sunset in Jerusalem, year 6000 Yah, rapidly approaching. Yahweh wants, he needs, to get Israel's undivided attention. And what better way than to speak prolifically of the witness he has promised to deploy throughout his prophets. That's why God brings this up. That's why these predictions are not just there in the Torah, but, well, in every prophet that we have read thus far, there's a reference. Aware of what God has repeatedly revealed, everyone listening to this program has a choice. You can capitalize upon what Yahweh has endeavored to bring to your attention, appreciate what he has deployed, that he has deployed his Spirit to make all this available for your benefit. You can read it, you can validate it, you can respond to it. Or you can discount these prophecies, ignore what God is offering, scoff at these words, retreat into religious rhetoric. Tell us about your faith. Cite some political platitudes. Continue as you and your people have been doing for the past 3,000 years. And see how that works out. So, Kirk, this is probably a good spot for us to take a break and pick this up this time next week. It's strange, I will tell you.
Yes.
Talking about oneself, but there is a reason, as we've shared, behind God's desire to do it this way. I think, I mean, you know, because we know each other quite well, but
yes,
perhaps others that are listening to this program can sense this. There is a tremendous joy that goes with knowing Yahweh. There's tremendous freedom. There is the greatest source of enlightenment and understanding the world, the universe, if you will, humankind, the past and the future, that is so satisfying. There is a spirit of boldness, of courage. And it should be contagious. If you're listening, this should cause you to say, I don't know what he has, but I want it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what he knows, but I want to know it too.
Yeah.
There's something really special going on here. A confidence and courage and insights so far beyond what we've ever heard before, and yet they're all grounded, they're all proven, they're all verifiable. They're all consistent with the message that Yahweh, the Creator God of the universe, conveyed to us over 3,000 years ago. And if you are among the chosen, Yehud, a Yisraelite, it's time for you to give up your adherence to a culture that has caused so much pain, to this notion that God does not have a name, to the ridiculousness of rabbis claiming to speak for him, to this notion that somehow apart from God that you can protect that little strip of land from the billions of people that want to run you into the sea. God has a name, it's Yahweh. He has a covenant, and it is a family relationship. He has offered you his Torah, and it is comprised of teaching and guidance. He has delineated a path home, and that path is through the Moed Mikre, beginning with the doorway to life, called Pesach, followed by the most important day of the year, which is unyeasted bread, matzah, where we are perfected so that we can be Bokurim, adopted into Yahweh's family, enriched and empowered on Shabuah, so we can do this job, all of us, on Towrah, sharing God's message, in hopes that the reunion on Kippurim is a marvelous one. I want you to change your mindset so that you recognize that Kippurim means reconciliation. It does not mean affliction. God wants you to embrace the covenant relationship and accept his hand, not twirl a stupid chicken above your head. And that Sukkah is all about returning to Eden and life in the garden. This is God's message. It is his offer. Listen, capitalize. It is liberating. It is empowering. It is enlightening. It is enriching. It is forever. And even beyond all of those wonderful benefits, at the center of it all is Yahweh. He's fun to be around. Incredibly approachable. Marvelous. Funny. A great teacher. Someone who is really the perfect dad. Wanting to spend eternity hand in hand doing exciting things together. That's the opportunity that's before you. There is none better. And I hope that you choose to embrace it. Visit, please, YadaYah.com. There's nothing for sale there. Everything is free. I think there's currently 22 books on the shelf. They're there for you to read. You can also go to Amazon. You can Google my name, Craig Wynn, or just Yada Yahowah series, and it'll take you to each of those books, which you can buy royalty-free, just for the printing and delivery cost from Amazon. So please do so. We'd encourage you to go to YadaYah.com. Excuse me, my little bit of COVID is still with me, is beginning to bite again. It's time I say good night. Kirk, thank you so much. We'll look forward to it.
Okay, buddy. It's a pleasure.
Shabbat shalom. Good night.
Shabbat shalom to you. Bye.